Well, hello and welcome to our backyard garden here in the South Carolina upstate. It is May 5th, 2024. This is episode 13, and we've got a beautiful Sunday morning. I did the front yard garden video already, and it went from being overcast to at least partly sunny and fairly bright just during that 20 minutes. And right now it's probably 68 degrees. It's going to be probably close to 80 by the time all is said and done today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm always here at the side of the house, but I just wanted to show off at the very beginning these snapdragons growing up out of the driveway, doing absolutely wonderfully. They just came up from seed, and that's kind of the nature of our garden here. We tend to get a lot of that for some reason. This area in particular, right down here on these steps, we've got you can see this is a cleome. It's a flowering plant that we've got a bunch of them coming up that we're going to show off in a minute. They come back from seed, and a seed managed to get down into that crack. Last year we had a vinca growing in the exact same spot. It does not appear to be coming back this year, but it really doesn't have much room because that cleome is going to be a pretty large plant that'll give us flowers hopefully throughout the summer. Over here, our iris, probably this is going to be the last week that we see very many irises. There might be a couple by next week, but this peaked a few weeks back. These beautiful bearded iris just fill this area, and the month before that, starting in late March, we had a bunch of white irises down in this area. It's kind of interesting with this bed. I don't talk about this a lot. This is where we always start our videos, but when we moved into this house 6 years ago, there were a number of huge holly bushes in here, and the hollies really didn't do anything. They didn't put on any berries. They just were greenery that covered up the side of the house, but they were really kind of a pain in the neck, and they didn't really add anything to the garden. Holly are very invasive, like a lot of things down here, and we haven't gotten them cut back, but you can kind of see back in there, they have continued to come up. If you don't get every last little segment of root, and that's almost impossible, you're going to be digging them out for years. So be careful when you put in a bush. If you are not sure you want it there forever, or you want something that you're going to have to eternally cut back, it may not be the best choice for you. But regardless, we put irises, and unfortunately, these irises have been prolific. They will fill up an area very quickly. They are also fairly invasive, but in a good way, because they give you these spectacular flowers, and they don't take over. They're easy to keep under control. These have finished up. These irises bloomed nicely over the last month, but they are done. We've got some daisies growing here. These will give us flowers later in the year. And then cleome, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a bunch of them at the ground level now. And then down here, I had a feeling that we would get more of these as the year progressed. Down in this area, we've got a bunch of them, even up into this area. These all came back from seeds of plants that we had last year. So we're going to be having a lot of big pink flowers from those later in the year. They're even down to here. They've spread quite a bit on the lower part of this hillside. So I'm really looking forward to those. Got to keep the weeds under control. That's kind of a problem. And I did spray. I probably killed off at least a few of the cleome amongst all the weeds earlier in the year. But fortunately, they have a fairly characteristic leaf pattern. They almost kind of look like marijuana to a certain extent, but they're very specific for cleome. And this one actually is getting to be pretty big. Most of the others have just broken ground, but this one's probably going to give us flowers within the next few weeks. That'd be my guess. All right, so we'll come over to the main part of the garden. Most of the upper segment of this hillside is early spring. We had hyacinths, daffodils, tulips over in here. They're all long gone, We had this knockout rose, a yellow knockout. It was just put in about a year ago, late April of last year, doing very well, but its initial cycle has peaked, and the flowers are mostly gone. So not a lot to see here, but it will come back with more before long. This is a hydrangea. We have 4 of those as we work our way down the hill, and we still have the seed pods from last year. We never cut them back. Not sure if it really matters, but later in the summer we'll get big white flowers from those again. We have oriental lilies here. These are getting bigger and bigger, lots of buds, so these are going to be covered with flowers before too long. As I mentioned in our front yard video, something that's very, very important with these lilies, you have to spray them for rabbits and deer because they will get eaten. There are a lot of pests and predators in the garden that will just eat these things, sometimes down to the ground, but they really go for the buds, and you don't want those broken off. It's kind of a tragic thing. Something else that has already peaked with its initial spring output is this digitalis. This is one of the bigger ones that we've had. It came back from seeds. It's a nice dark pink color, getting the big seed pods on them. But if last year is any example, we'll get more stalks of flowers as the year progresses. We've got these down here at the ground level, and hopefully we'll continue to get blooms on those the rest of the summer. Typically these are mostly spring flowers, but for whatever reason they've continued to give us buds throughout the summer, at least some of the plants, and not all of them. This one is not as robust. You can see some of the leaves yellowing down there. Usually means they don't like the soil that they're in. There's something about that spot that they're not thrilled about, although it still has given us some really pretty peach colored flowers. That's still some little miniature pansies down here, Johnny jump ups. They're doing very well. The key with these was, again, spraying them, keeping the deer away, keeping the rabbits away. Once they started doing that, they started to do really well, but they were kind of struggling at the beginning. If you can see here, our little friendly bumblebee. Without our bumblebee friends, our flowers wouldn't really be doing a whole lot, so we always welcome them. Got a big butterfly bush here, getting ready in another couple of months to give us some bright purple flowers, but not doing a whole lot right now. Up on top of that, or growing up through that, is a clematis. It has finished up. You can see some of the petals down on the ground. This was a cleome. It's a blanking out on the name. Giacomini. I've got a few flowers here still in bloom, growing up through some of these other plants. I've got our one of 2 petite knockout roses. This one's doing pretty well. Didn't do so well last year. Last year was its first year. We bought 3 of them, put one in the front in full sun, and then this one and its companion back here, they're in partial sun, partial shade. They're doing much better this year. Not as big as the one in the front, but they don't need to be huge, just as long as they put out flowers, which they have been doing, which is really cool. Got a what we call a ground cover rose here, yellow one. Last year it was just at the ground level, but this year it grew a little higher and has put out a lot more flowers. Again, it's kind of done for the time being, but it'll continue to give us flowers off and on for a while yet. Something else that's worth noting, I put this back in the by the fence, but these little tiny white flowers on this viburnum, it's a variation of the normal viburnum. These flowers come and go very quickly. In fact, they were on this, I think, last week. I can't tell if these, I think these have finished up. But they'll turn into little berries, little tiny blue colored berries. Usually the birds eat them very quickly, so they don't last for long, but hopefully we'll get a few to show off at some point soon. This hydrangea down here, I started to say earlier, it has, for some reason, really spread out and covered a much wider area than the others. We've got clematis growing up through it to some extent, so it's not choking out its nearby flowers. And we may have to move this rose though at some point, because as this keeps getting bigger and bigger, this is going to have no sunshine at all, and it does need some. Almost missed this little snapdragon coming up from a couple years ago. We put in several big ones. Some of them have come back, some of them have really not come back. So it was good for the year we put it in, and maybe one more year, but after that they kind of start to go away. Back here on the fence, we have some more clematis. We have 3 that we put in, kind of growing together. They've got a lot of buds on them, so we'll get some color out of those before too long. This combination here was absolutely spectacular, and this peaked about 2 weeks ago. It's just a standard knockout rose, and then we had this really unusual complex clematis growing up through it, so it gave us these huge blooms that kind of look like dahlias, but they're just clematis. It's the only one we have. We have not found any more like it anywhere, and the combination of the white and the red together for about 2 or 3 weeks was absolutely spectacular. So that's something, if you want to make the effort, you can go back to some of our earlier videos from late April and see what those looked like. Here we have the first of our 6 azaleas that are all pretty much finished up now. I don't think we have any more flowers in bloom. Our one backyard viburnum still has a few blooms on it, or petals left, not much. The ones in the front yard have all pretty well finished up. These were spectacular for about 3 weeks, but like a lot of our spring stuff, they come and go very, very quickly. It's the downside of spring gardening, and that's one of the reasons that I won't say we, my wife, she's really the architect of this garden. We saw her on a video a couple weeks ago, but you know, she's really designed this garden to really flow from season to season, so you're never completely without color. There's always something in bloom. So you go from early spring into late spring, into early summer, midsummer, late summer, early fall, and there's something growing, something blooming at all times. Unfortunately, if you just plant, you know, daffodils and viburnum and azaleas, your color is going to be very limited to certain seasons, and that's a nice thing about the knockout roses and clematis for that matter. These are things that'll bloom. They may peak in the spring, but they're going to continue to give you blooms really throughout the growing season, which around here starts mid-February and goes into early November, really until we get our first frost. Now, last year we got our first frost right around Halloween. The year before that it was October 16th, but there are a number of years where we haven't even gotten a frost until well into November. Those are good years. We like those years. Here we got a couple more digitalis, a white variety, and then a lavender color back here, all doing very well. As I said earlier, I'm hoping that these don't just bloom in the spring, that they'll give us more color as the year progresses. They are typically known as a spring flower, but we'll see what happens as we move forward. I got a lot of daylilies down in here. These have progressively gotten bigger and bigger each year. Excuse me. But they won't bloom for another couple of months. Here we've got our stilby. A lot of these getting ready to start blooming before long. We'll have a pink one over here. I think this is a white one. They're all getting their stalks of color So probably within the next couple of weeks we'll start to get blooms. It's kind of a late spring, early summer flower. Red ones here. So they're all doing very well. They like it here in the shade, and this is the one shady spot of our backyard. We have a lot of trees that kind of protect things like azaleas and astilbe and viburnum that don't really like a lot of sun. Now as we continue, we have a little pathway here that goes down to the pond. We have way back in the shade, we have a wisteria. This almost died last year. I just put it in, and that's saying something because wisteria are hard to kill. They're very hardy, a little too hardy for some people, but it is doing okay. It's not going to bloom this year, but it has survived, and maybe next year it'll give us some blooms. The rest of our wisteria are have kind of peaked, sadly, and they're going to kind of dwindle, but you know, for the time being we can still enjoy some of these beautiful purple flowers. This is absolutely one of my favorite things in the garden. I talk about these a lot in the springtime because we have both wild varieties and domestic varieties. The wild varieties you see everywhere down here. You see them on hillsides, you see them on telephone poles, and growing up through woods everywhere, and they put their flowers out from late March through about mid-April. And then ours, which are more domestic, they start blooming mid-April through early May. So between the two varieties, you've got these beautiful purple flowers for almost 2 full months. Now next to that is a clematis, which is also doing very well, giving us a lot of flowers over here on this side of the fence. And then we have black-eyed Susans, which have just kind of spread by seed over here into the mulch. We're going to leave those because they'll give us some color later on in the year, probably towards the end of summer. Big azalea here, long since finished up. This area, I've talked about this a number of times already this spring, but this was kind of a wild card. We weren't sure what to expect in this area. The deer got in here over the winter, I would say back in January, and ate a lot of what we had, including this rose. They ate this right down to the ground. This was an unusual knockout in that it had these bicolored flowers. They bud as yellow, or maybe a combination of yellow and red, like you can see there. And when they come out, they're sort of a nice combination of pink and white. And this thing is prolific. It has just covered this area with flowers. It's not as big as it used to be because of the deer, but they're still doing very well this year. Now, I know this is a garden video, but since we have a pond, we do have some waterfowl. We have a couple of ducks there. This is a common sight in the spring. We'll have pairs of ducks and some ducklings coming to follow. Every year we get some ducklings. Unfortunately, this is an area where there are a lot of predators, so they have to be very, very careful. I don't know where they put their nest, but somewhere along the water line. Last year we had a couple of geese right over in this area. They had a nest right out in the open, and unfortunately a predator got to them. But the mother goose sat on they were Canadian geese, and she sat on that nest 24/7 for a couple of weeks. But we'll see ducklings before long. It is that time of year. Now, getting back to the garden, we have these more bearded iris still doing very well, but they're probably going to be finished up by the end of this week. Lots of daylilies back in here doing very well. We have another rose. I think this is just a tea rose. You can just barely see these pink flowers kind of buried back in here. Unfortunately, as some of the other things grow, you find some of the roses that you put in originally start to get choked out. not necessarily literally, but just to the point where you can't see the flowers too well, and then you're kind of faced with either just leaving them alone or trying to move them. Moving them is easier said than done. Sometimes that'll end up killing the plant, and sometimes they end up moving to a better place and they thrive. You just never know. Now over here we have more of these bicolored roses kind of growing up through everything else. I mean, this one is growing right up in the middle of an azalea bush, and they're all coming from this original plant over here, which is really, instead of being one big bush of roses, it's really kind of spread out almost like vines. Although it's not a climber, it's really more of a knockout rose. Kind of interesting. We're kind of getting the same effect here. This is a gigantic knockout rose that deer ate about half of the plant last year in the wintertime. It has come back with a vengeance though. This is all new growth since then, and it is just covered with buds and roses. So this one is kind of in an extended peak phase right now, and it'll continue to give us flowers really throughout the year. It's one of the biggest knockout roses that we have in the entire garden. It's one of our favorites. Back here we've got a mix of jasmine with the little tiny white flowers, and then clematis growing up along the fence, as well as roses. So we've got a nice combination of color. I should mention back in here, kind of a similar situation. We've got climbing roses, those pink ones, some clematis and jasmine on top of all of that. As we continue over through here, I should mention we've got these Oriental and Asiatic lilies giving us a lot of buds. They're not open yet, but they will be soon. Got daisies down here. These are going to open up in another couple of weeks, I think. So we're going to be getting a lot more color. Even though our spring flowers are done, the early summer flowers are going to be following very close behind. Got some coreopsis down here. Not dramatic, but it's a nice sort of mustard colored yellow flower, really pretty. More jasmine up through here. Again, you can see the little white flowers, very fragrant, a very pleasant smell, very typical of the South. They always make me think of the song, what is it called? Summer, I forget the name of it. It's by Seals and Cross, from about 50 years ago. They talk about jasmine, jasmine being in bloom in July, and actually down here it's in May. So up here, as we get into the area around the trellis, these big pink climbing roses are doing well. They peaked maybe a week ago. They came and went very quickly. They will continue to bloom though, off and on, really through November. So by the end of the year, we'll have had thousands of these little pink blooms. None of them more than a couple of inches across, but even if you look at this one closely, just buds everywhere. At any given time, they might put out 50 buds just on one branch, and they have done a nice job of coming up across. I've got to get away from the sun here, and you can't really see it so well from this angle, but the top of our trellis is finally covered. It's something, it's been a goal of mine for years, and it's been a lot of fun watching that develop. Over here we've got a number of things. We've got climbing roses here. These typically in the past would grow more up onto the top of the trellis, but this year, for whatever reason, they're kind of doing their own thing, kind of hanging off the side, and again mixed in with the jasmine. So you've got both the red and the white blooms. There's some of the jasmine, and then right next to them the red. Over here you've got a lot of jasmine up onto the trellis, along with the climbing roses. And from this angle too, we don't show this angle as often, but we've got a lot of the knockout roses, jasmine, pink climbing roses, clematis, all kinds of things. 3 primary types of flowers that have just covered this area with color, and it's a lovely combination. We've got some bearded iris down here still going strong. Those will probably finish up before too long, but as soon as they do, they will be followed by our native daylilies, the orange type. You see those kind of throughout this area, and those will bloom in June and July to some extent, and then as soon as those finish up, we'll have black-eyed Susans taking their place, giving us more yellow flowers heading into fall. Speaking of yellow flowers, we've got these Russian sage down here. We had a number of Russian sage up in the front yard. Most of them are finished up. These are still doing pretty well. They'll give us color for another couple of weeks. They don't last terribly long, but they're really fun, a nice little alternative to the big bearded iris. Over here, some more of the climbers, and then this is just a regular tea rose. It was covered with huge blooms just a few days ago. The rain really did those in, so not a lot to see there. Same thing back in here. A lot of things have kind of finished up. We'll get a few more blooms, like this little pink rose here. This is one of our native plants, and I cannot remember the name of it. I want to say it's a type of phlox, but I don't think that's right. There's some dianthus here in the front. We've got some calla lilies coming up back in here. We bought several different types of calla lilies last year. Got some more coming up in this area and over here. So we're going to be getting some of those. They're not real tall, but they're very, very pretty. It's a very unusual looking flower, and those are going to be fun to watch. From this angle, you can really see how everything has spread up onto the trellis. The climbing roses, clematis, jasmine, all of that through here. So it's a real fun area of the garden. And then we'll come around back to the other side. This area is a little bit of a disappointment. It's probably our least exciting area of the yard. We do have a wisteria here. Almost thought this one died, but it has come back. It's not going to bloom this year, but it is, you can see our little squirrel friend there. They have a tendency to do some damage, but if we spray appropriately, they'll keep to themselves. Hi there, squirrel friend. I don't mind them sharing our environment, and I don't really have a choice, but there are certain things I want them to stay away from. So we have clematis here doing pretty well. Another clematis here also doing pretty well. This one I tried to train up onto the fence. It wouldn't do it. It just wanted to stay on the ground for whatever reason. We've got some scattered gladiolus here. Glads are kind of strange things. We put these in about 3 or 4 years ago, probably 4 years ago. And they gave us some beautiful flowers right away, but the second year, not quite as many. Third year, very few. This year, most of them aren't even coming up. We did put some more bulbs in back in this area a couple of weeks ago. We'll see what those do later in the summer. Got clematis over here. More clematis here. We had a big white one that was growing up onto the tree last week. That one is finished up. And again, as I say, when I say finished up, they're not done for the year. They'll still give us some flowers, but the initial batch of them have kind of done for now. I always like showing off this on the other side of the fence. Our neighbors have these beautiful yellow tea roses. These bloom very nicely, very bright yellow every year. This is a really good time of the season for them. And our Giacomini clematis is growing right next to that. And so I always like to show those off if I can remember. This is our big wisteria. This thing grows kind of out of control. I just let it go because it's back in the corner of the lot along a fence. There's not really much it can do that's damaging, except up onto the tree. And this is something that as soon as it's done blooming in a few weeks, I'm going to cut this back a bit because I don't want it to take over the tree. And you can see some of the leaves. Last week you could see flowers all the way up into almost to the top of the tree, because these things will just grow anywhere that they can. The vines are very invasive. But most of the flowers are done on this one. It started to bloom about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and so the timing, the spring timing on these is just about finished up. Over here we've got canna. These have not been all that impressive. We were given these, and we had a well-defined space where we could put them. But they're very difficult to maintain. They're kind of labor intensive, and the number of flowers that we got off of them were really not enough to justify what we had. So we're not really putting any effort into them. It's not a pretty area of the yard. It does give us a few flowers, mostly white and red, later in the summer, but for right now they're not really doing much. What else do we have? Coming around back over to this side of the yard, we have, again, just a little patch of irises that have kind of made a little colony for themselves back amongst the canna. The canna are very, very invasive. So this is another thing that you don't want getting out of control, because once they spread outside of a given area, they will just take over, and they will keep coming back, like those holly that I mentioned earlier in the video. We got some black-eyed Susans starting to grow here. These won't bloom for a few months, but as you look at this side, lots of color, lots of different colors. Clematis mostly, but between those, the jasmine and the roses, it's really, really beautiful area. So that kind of finishes up this part of the garden. We're going to go up top and finish up the video, and then we'll move on with our day. So up here, we're kind of at an in-between phase. This is primarily a summer garden. We had a few things that were blooming really nicely in the spring. Most of those are done now, but we do have this batch of bearded iris that are fully in bloom. Why these come out later than most of the others in the yard, I don't know, but I'm happy to see that, because it gives us color after everything else is done. Got a couple clematis down here. These have kind of struggled. This is an area right at the end of the water pipe. I had tried to train them up onto the fence, but they seem to resist growing up there for some reason. When I do train them up in this area, they just don't seem to want to stay there for some reason. I got a nice rose here. This particular tea rose was covered with pink flowers just a couple weeks ago, and they're done now. It'll give us sporadic flowers the rest of the year, but the biggest batch is here in early spring. Here we've got Veronica. These have really come out a lot more since last year. I'm sorry, since last week. They'll give us these nice purple stalks of color. We have some in the back in this area as well. I didn't show those off. To some extent, they're sort of lost a little bit in amongst everything else. But we've got some phlox here. We've got another knockout rose in this area, a yellow one. It was covered with flowers just a couple weeks ago. Done for the time being. Jenny put in some strawberries that were given to her here. We'll see what those do. Never know quite what to expect with those. They do tend to come back. They'll usually give you some decent berries in the early part of the year, and then less as time goes on. Birds tend to love those. More Veronica here. These will continue to get bigger and more extensive as the year progresses. Some daylilies in this area, some more roses here. Got a calla lily that's coming up in this area, a couple more over in here. We put in a bunch of those last year. Got one coming up over here as well. I think I put in 7 or 8 calla lilies last year. And we've got oriental lilies. We had a lilac that never bloomed this year. And then a Nellie Moser clematis growing up through that. This particular daylily is starting to get some buds on it, so this one will probably bloom in another 3 or 4 weeks. But amongst that, coming right out of the base, is this digitalis. This is not an area where we typically see digitalis, but that one is an exception. We did have one lilac that bloomed back in here. The blooms are long gone. It continues to grow very slowly, but it's doing well. And then lots of daylilies through here. We've got another rose, really pretty red rose right here. And just various other things, more of the Oriental and Asiatic lilies in this area, getting close to blooming. Probably another 2 or 3 weeks we'll start to get the first of those. That's when you know summer is here. Now, when you say summer, of course, that doesn't mean it's actually summer by the calendar. They sort of represent summer in the north, but here they'll start to come out in late May, so it's a good month before summer actually starts. Here we have our single biggest climbing rose, covered again with those pink blooms, and it's growing well up onto the side of the stairway there. And even though a lot of these are kind of finishing up, it will continue to put out more flowers throughout the entire year. You can see a lot of buds still coming out, so we're going to have a lot of color moving forward into summer. Another coreopsis here, again the mustard yellow flowers. These will probably finish up before too long, but for the time being they're really pretty. Got our one blueberry back in here. It's actually starting to get some berries. Oh, there's another calla lily coming up, just breaking ground. Looks like we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, this is our biggest crop ever. Looks like we've got maybe 11 actual berries on the blueberry. Rather a disappointing flower or plant. Hasn't really done a whole lot, but it's kind of interesting. And that brings us back to the start. So again, you can kind of see from here the look that I've been going for all this time, with the flowers growing across both sides of the trellis, pink on the right and red on the left. And so even though it's peaked a little bit now, it's still going to continue to give us color throughout the year. So hope it's sunny wherever you are. The sun continues to take over the sky here as we've done these 2 videos this morning, and I think we're headed for close to 80 degrees today. So wherever you are, I hope you're having fun with your garden, and we'll see you next week.